special guest with us today, coming to our integrated family. He spent over two decades solving master data challenges. He's worked with different enterprises to elevate their brands, and he's also a host for the Master Data Marathon. It's now on its third edition. Master Data Marathon 2, which I was able to attend, was really awesome. Great insights, lots of bodies from various industries sharing how they manage their master data and how we can use the strict rules in master data and leverage it to enable companies to go that one step further. And he's also an author of the Telling Your Data Story book. Hope you can see that clearly.
It's a little bit fuzzy.
Little bit fuzzy. Okay, there we go. So I think it's.
There you go.
We'll show it again. But yeah, he's got Taylor the Data Whisperer, and he's got quite a lot of stories to tell.
Hey everybody, is that my cue? Sorry. Hi everybody, nice to see you all here, wherever we are. Scott Taylor, Data Whisperer, here at Studio 5M, high atop the Data Whisperer World Headquarters in beautiful Black Rock, Connecticut, on the shores of the Herman Beach. See my view, that's literally my view behind me in the spirit of Brother Tom. Want to have a nice background, and in this case, it's my actual background. I tried to set it up on the balcony, but I couldn't get the light right. But that's literally what I'm looking at out that way. Only it's filled with boats today, because it's still the summer. But good to be here. What are we doing today? Tom told me no prep. I just want to get that out of the way up front. He said no prep, so I'm all yours.
I thought your background is related to data, so that's good to have this background.
Yeah.
So I think you're gonna kick us off with a video.
Let me do that. How you want me to start off with a little data story?
Yeah.
That I told my grandson. We'll see if this works here. Get everybody going. It's a nice little data story you should all follow. There we go. Can you see that? We ready to go?
How are we doing today?
Yeah.
Should we read some books?
Yes. Could you read me a book about data governance, Papa?
Of course I can. How about The Little Red Data Hen?
Yeah.
Once upon a time, in a legacy barnyard, there was a little red data hen. She knew all her data could help all the other animals do their job better. But they never paid enough attention. One day, the little red data hen called all the animals into the barnyard. Who wants to create a data-driven utopia of interoperability where our insights flow freely from workflow to edge across integrated ecosystems? Asked the little red data hen.
Got a lot of buzzwords.
I know. Who wants great data? Asked the little red data hen. I do. Mood, the sales cow. I need to cross-sell and upsell. I do. Bark the finance puppy. I need to maintain regulatory compliance. I do. Oink the marketing pig. I need better targeting for our customer journey. But the little red data hen had a big problem. All our data is a mess, she said, and it's stuck in silos. And because she lived on a farm, those were real silos.
What are silos?
That's a place where people keep data separate from other data.
Why?
It's a problem everywhere.
So they don't get mixed up?
Yeah, so they don't get mixed up. I'm seeking stakeholder engagement, said the little red hen. Who will help me collect and catalog the data, she asked. Not I, moved the sales cow. I need to focus on revenue. Not I, barked the finance puppy. I don't see the immediate ROI. Not I, oinked the marketing pig. My priority is brand equity. Oh, very well. I'll do it myself, said the little red data hen. And she collected and cataloged all the data she could from all the silos and migrated graded it.
Did she do ETL?
No, she did ELT.
Oh.
Now, the little red data hen needed more help. Who will help me govern, structure, and steward the data? Not I. You're in charge of data, not me. Not I. That sounds like an IT job. Not I. Just upgrade your software stack and that will take care of it. Oh, very well. I'll do it myself, said the little red data hen. And she went off and established a data governance skunk works. And because she lived on a farm, she used a real skunk.
Yeah.
Finally, the little red data hen thought she had everything ready to go. She had taken the data from the silos, she cataloged, governed, structured, and stewarded the data in a hybrid cloud data lake behind the barn.
She could use a data mesh.
You're right. Who will help me leverage all our trusted data? Asked the little red hen. I will. Now I have customer 360. I will. Now all our numbers tie out. I will. Now we can reduce customer churn. Finally, the whole barnyard can have consistent KPIs. They all mooed and barked and oinked. The little red hen was so happy and excited. Unfortunately, it was too late. By that point, the legacy barnyard was disrupted by a data science-based farming startup that used predictive analytics to provide an innovative crop-as-a-service offering.
What's that?
They had to close down because they waited too long to fix their data.
Why?
They just couldn't get the stakeholder engagement. The finance puppy was given away. The sales cow, the marketing pig, and the little red data hen were all sold to a food service operation. Don't be like a bunch of silly barnyard animals. Managing data is the job of the whole farm. The end.
Such a funny book. Papa, is data the new oil?
That is a different story.
I'm back. Hi, how are you?
Bravo,
That's it for my grandson.
bravo,
Theo
bravo.
pulls through. What a natural. Anyway, hope you appreciate that. That's if any of you haven't met me before, that's pretty much my style. This is what I do. Create content about the power and value of proper data management. Because as I believe, you've got to determine the truth in data first before you start to derive meaning. I'm obviously on the truth side, hence the meaning of my truth hat here. But it's all about getting that truth established first before you go off on all these wonderful integrated machine learning and AI activities that many of you focus on. So trying to get that other side of the data space a little more coverage.
We assure you, Big Brother Scott, that your teachings pre-infected our inception.
Okay.
Definitely.
I'll take that as a compliment. Pre-infection as a compliment. Yeah.
Okay, so so I'll kick off with a few questions. Awesome video. Nice to see a different view. Which one wins? I think the adorability there versus the puppets, but the puppets is still awesome.
Try to have a range,
Yeah.
different techniques, different tactics, always the same message.
Keep it variety.
yeah.
Keep variety. So when we look at master data, and as we know, it can be more of a push and pull. Who's responsible? Who's not responsible? And when we look into getting that foundations, would you be able to describe what is building up a great foundation? I believe in your book you mentioned your 8 8s and your 3 Vs. If you could explain a little bit more on that and how you came around that to use that to help different enterprises get a handle on their master data. And then then there was a second one is why or so say, what is the issues that you see with companies maintaining the metadata? Because that can also be quite messy, or if it's not maintained correctly, I think that doesn't have as much emphasis as that it should do based on the metadata side of maintaining all the master data.
I'll answer the second question first by sharing with you kind of what my scope is and what I focus on. So I am exclusively on the why rather than the how. And I generalize things on purpose. Some people feel it's like a little overgeneralized, a little simplified, but I try and boil things down to kind of their essence there. And so I lump all the stuff you talked about under the kind of phylum heading of data management, and counterpoint that versus business intelligence. And in data management, master data, reference data, metadata, data governance, data stewardship, MDM, RDM, PIM, DAM, all these foundational activities that people do in an enterprise to determine that truth, to create that foundational data that then goes in to all the business intelligence activities. Business intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning, BI, visualization, data storytelling for most people is putting data in kind of some sort of format that or approach that the business can use to lead to some kind of business decision. So I don't get too deep into, okay, is it metadata, is it master data, is it reference data? It's all kind of determining the truth for me. So I go really thin, but really wide, because I am trying to get business stakeholders and executive leadership to understand and then fund data management efforts. And everybody knows if you've got better data, everything else is easier. Everything else comes out better. The insight is more effective. So let's start with making sure the ingredients are correct. So I may have sort of glossed over both your questions there, Jonathan, but for me, it's really at that high level. So I'm all about the why. I'm not about the how at all. And I spent, in terms of how I came up with some of these pithy things that are in the book, the 3 V's, which are what I call kind of a knowing wink to the 3 V's of big data. Mine are vocabulary, voice, and vision. So how do you really just kind of, those are my 3 V's here. Hold on just a sec. There you go. I got them up. Pop that way. See? These are my tools. These are the kind of tools I use, right? So you guys have all kinds of fancy tools. You got R, you got Python. I have, PowerPoint and a little software that lets me integrate my slides right when I'm speaking. But my 3 V's have data storytelling, vocabulary, voice, and vision, a way to simplify this process to get people to understand what the hell we are talking about, especially in the data management side. So in data science, you've got an advantage. You can actually show your work. You can actually show direct cause and effect. We created this model, and look, we reduced customer churn by 5%. In data management, it's really...
Real quick.
Sure.
It's not actually displaying anything. It's kind of like showing your background instead of what you think you're presenting.
Oh, really? Oh, weird. Okay. Am I better now? No?
You're back on full now. We see you shifting over. We see that there's a separate space, but it's not actually displaying anything other than your background.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll just wing it without the slides then. So much for my fancy tools. But I thought that was working there. So my 3 V's: vocabulary, voice, and vision. Vocabulary is the words you use. How do you talk about it? What kind of terminology do you use? Do you use all these technical terms? Do you use these overwrought buzzwords? Or are you speaking in the language of the business? You got to speak the language of the business if you want business people to understand. If you want your peers to understand, it's a whole different topic area. But if you're trying to explain it, use the language of your business. The voice is how you communicate. So I say harmonize your story to a common voice. Harmony doesn't mean everybody sings the same notes, but it does mean they all sound good together. And what's the vision? The vision of everything you do in data, I don't care what it is, whether it's data management or data science, whether it's any of the topic areas I ran through, everything you do in data has to enable the strategic intentions of your enterprise. Where's your company trying to go? And why is what you are doing in data going to help the company get there? You can start at any of these, but you got to do all 3. And you wrap all that together, you speak in a way people understand. All of you talk about the same thing in a similar way. And the reason for all of it is to move the business forward. You know, keep those in mind, and that'll help direct your efforts, whether it's data management or data science.
Awesome. And then for the people that aren't too familiar, maybe with your 8-8s, that's how you build up the help get that generalization and for the foundations. And how did you come across that yourself before you started using that? And then how do you use that to help the enterprises leverage your 8-8s?
So my 8-8s are, again, I try to come up with these frameworks, these kind of pithy ways, as Tom always calls me, that, you know, king of the pith out there. What's that kind of simple phrase? What's memorable? My frameworks you don't do data modeling off of, all right? You know, you don't create actual operational things, but it's a way to talk about it. So my 8-8s, if I remember in order, it's relate, validate, integrate, aggregate, interoperate, evaluate, and communicate. They all end in 8, and there's 8 of them. And then the final one is circulate. And the idea is everything I have ever seen in data does one of those 8 things. And I've challenged people to say, okay, come up with a 9th one. But the reason you do data is to relate, is to build relationships. If you don't have relationships, you don't have a business. So everything, again, I keep saying everything, because a lot of the time we spend on doing stuff that isn't directed toward moving the business forward. We get really enamored with, you know, a cool little project that maybe might do something. So most of the time, most of the data work should do most of these 8-8s. I came up with it. I had like 3 or 4 of them about 25 years ago when I started in the data business. And I was running a brand at Nielsen that was helping people outsource customer master maintenance. So we would go to MDM teams, data management teams, and we said, all right, our data will help you integrate, aggregate, and communicate, which are 3 things you want to do with data, right? You want to integrate data, take disparate sources of data and pull them all together. You want to aggregate data up to something. That's most reporting is some form of aggregation. And then you want to communicate on a code-to-code basis. If you can use a standard set of identifiers, as an example, between 2 systems, then those systems don't have to figure out what each other is talking about. Obviously, I'm personifying the system-to-system conversation like they're people, but you know, you have a unique identifier, which is the thing I sold at Nielsen, and that helped people communicate. When I got to Dun & Bradstreet, which was the second probably major iconic brand that I worked with, I had to expand those 8s because the product set was much broader, the client base was much bigger, and so I just kind of played with it there. I actually got to 7, and a friend of mine who worked at D&B just said, no, you got to come up with an 8th one. I don't like this 7. He just kept pounding me on it, challenged me on it, and I said, okay, and that's where I came up with circulate, which is data has got to move. So these were all things that I did to help people understand the value of that stuff. Because I spent a lot of my early career explaining things to people and realizing they didn't know what I was talking about. So when you go up to the head of sales, and we were selling to sales and the business folks, that's how I learned how to do what I do. And I'm getting a whole bunch of noise in the background there. I don't know. Oops. There's one story that I tell in the book about going to the head of sales of this large bakery company. It was a national bakery company, doing my spiel, and him just kind of leaning back and, you know, in the chair and going, Scott, that all sounds great. I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't see how any of that helps me sell bread. That's what I have to do. I have to sell bread. And my data could do that. I just didn't explain it very well. And that little parable is something I'd like all of you to kind of take heart and, you know, look at seriously for your own business. So if you're going to a business person and trying to help them solve a problem, you got to speak in their language and listen for their problem. There are tons of problems at whatever company you work at that data can help solve. I would say you don't have to come up with the ideas on your own. Just go listen to business people talk about their problems. Operation people, finance people, marketing, anybody on the side that doesn't actually work with data day to day like you all do, they'll tell you their problems. And most of them, if they have anything to do with trying to do something at scale, need the kind of data and expertise that you have. Just listen to them and they'll explain it to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So we had one question in the chat, and from Brother Hugo. He asked, "What is ELT?"
Oh, ELT, isn't that extract, transform, load, right? Isn't that the way that people move data commonly? And then, I kind of joke about this in the book too, and that's why I had that little interplay with my grandson. People came out not that long ago with, all right, it's not ELT, it's not ETL, it's ELT. And I just thought, would they fix a typo? But that was this big revolutionary thing, right? So you load, I guess, instead of transform first. I'm not going to this is about as technical as I get, which is pretty lame. But it's just a play on that kind of ETL, ELT.
Awesome. And then, open open questions to the rest of the family. If you have any, Tom's raised his hand, so
yes, sir.
So we'll take Tom's question next.
So it's more of a praise. When I decided to really focus on data science on LinkedIn, the first strong voice of reason I heard was Scott's, and Scott and I became friends just by me thanking him for his posts and his videos and his good message, and I started sharing it with people at work. But I found it comical how much Scott's rubbed off on me, because did you notice how close what he was saying is to what I tell you guys about get off your butt and go find out what's keeping our business friends up at night and figure out how you can solve their problems with data. Just thanks, Scott. It was really well, it was pithy. It was very pithy in a very, very constructive, pithy way.
You try, can you simplify? I do exercise like how few words can I use? When you try to figure out how to explain something. As I mentioned, I focus on the why, not the how. If you're trying to get business support, if you're trying to get stakeholder engagement, if you have 5 minutes with your CEO, which all of you should aspire to at least get, they don't care about how you're doing stuff until they understand why it's important. There's a lot of books, Simon Sinek wrote this great book about why. He didn't come up with why. Why's been around forever. But he reinforced that fact that that's really what at least get people interested in what you're talking about. You got to have both. You got to have the why and the how. You got to balance those things. There is a balance, but most people in the technology space love to explain how they're going to do something. Or even worse, how they did all the things they did before they got to the point of how they really did it. And that's, people have time for that. And unfortunately, they're not going to appreciate it like you do. But if you want to get their attention, start with the why. Start with why, get to the why, and your business, understand your business. And those things will come out of that process you take to understand your business.
It's quite a common common detail that's often missed. How the soft skill in the communication. You talk about it. Tom mentors it about it. We have Gilbert that has his book all on soft skills for people in data, and it seems that it is a big chunk. It's a common skill that a lot of people don't enhance on. They just focus on the data. So we totally agree that communication in this space is critical to get those stakeholders on board.
I'm all about the soft skills. That's it. I don't know if I have any hard skills. I'm not a practitioner, so I don't even do data work. Here's my big secret that I not keep very well. I don't actually do the work that I talk about. I'm not a data governance person. I know you met George Farrakhan, Susan Walsh, these folks who actually work with data day to day. I just am good at talking about it. I sold data services, that helps. You get good at explaining it. I sold and helped market and put the strategy together for some data services, so at Dun & Bradstreet and at Nielsen. Because of that, you start to talk to lots and lots of different kinds of companies, and you begin to learn. You listen for the patterns. I mean, it is a data kind of head. I mean, I think even though I don't work with data, I think I have a data head about me. And you look for the patterns, and look for kind of the consistent inputs, and you're looking for what people are trying to, the result they're trying to get to. And, then you bring it back to folks and go, your problems are actually more the same than they are different, no matter what business you're in, no matter what category or sector, no matter what geography. If you're an enterprise, that's kind of the level that I work at, enterprise level. So if you're an enterprise, then you have these really classic data issues that are common, whether you're a bank or a manufacturer or a media company or distributor, whatever you happen to do. You're going to find your problems, if you described it to somebody else who is also an enterprise, they're going to sound awfully similar.
Yep. So we could take a question from Magdi first, and then we'll take the two questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Magdi. How are you?
I'm just
Nice
curious. Hi, Scott. Hi, nice to see you again. I'm just curious about one thing. What I never asked you, and I never heard about it. You are in this business like 25 years, and I'm just curious. How did it start for you? So what was the experience that triggered you to become the evangelist of data management? What was it, a bad experience, or what is a realization that something goes wrong? Or because now everybody's talking about data, so it is obvious now that it's important. But 25 years ago, it was a totally different business culture. So the focus was much more on profit, sales, and customer relationships. So data, for me, at least, sounds like a secondary thing that time. Was it an experience that triggered that, okay, you have to do something about it and you have to be a vocalist for this whole thing? Or how did it start?
How did it start? So I think, first of all, just like you said, I think my head is sort of data oriented. I mentioned a lot. My parents told me as a kid, instead of building with my Lego, I sorted it. So I think that was an early indication that I was kind of organizing, structuring things. I find a lot of Lego sorters in the data management side of the space. But I worked at Nielsen. I got my job at Nielsen, or it wasn't Nielsen yet. It was a company that eventually got bought by Nielsen. I knew the people there. I had no experience in data. But it looked like a good opportunity. And my first day, I was just a line sales guy selling this data service that had been around for 30 years at that point. And that's 25 years ago. And the first day, the sales manager comes in and he brings this giant, thick book. This was before PowerPoint, literally, right? So we used to print out slides. I'm kind of going back in the day. We used to print these acetates out, or you do overheads and kind of show them. And he brings this thick book out, and he says, I'm going to take you through the sales pitch. And before he even started, my thought was, that thing is way too long. I don't care what's in there. They've got to be able to figure out a better way to tell this story. So they explained this whole thing as mind-numbing, listening to these people talk about this data service. It would just go on and on. It would focus so much on the technical stuff. It would, and it wasn't a very big business. And I proved later, because we changed the story, it was a really valuable business that people just didn't understand. So I kind of took it upon myself, because I had to make quota, right? I didn't want a lot of episodes where you have that head of sales going, I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm just trying to sell stuff. And I just got good at telling that story, kind of smoothing it out. I made it a lot more exciting. I got rid of a bunch of crap that nobody really cared about. I changed a lot of the names of things to make them a little more accessible, to have people understand it without having, if you have a term and it's self-explanatory, then you don't have to go further. They just get it right away. If you have a term that's really complicated and then you have to explain it, you're wasting all this time, and people are trying to follow this stuff. You know, you're fluent and they're not, and it's hard to communicate that stuff. So being a natural storyteller, it took a lot of acting in college. I did a lot of community theater after college and did some local theater and all that kind of stuff. So I don't mind being on stage and talking and, you know, getting attention, all that kind of thing. So it all sort of came together. And while I was working at this business, the way I was presenting the business really caught on. And the data that we sold was this master data, syndicated master data that other companies would use. And I began to see how much value they were getting out of it. And they would explain to me, you know, this stuff that you guys have, this is what we really want. We just want this little piece, which ended up being really structured master data. We had a whole bunch of other kind of indicators and attributes on this file, but they really wanted the core stuff. They wanted a unique identifier, they wanted a hierarchy, they wanted a taxonomy, and they wanted a geography. Okay? And those four things, today I call the 4 C's: code, company, category, country. Back then I wish I had called it that because it would have been easier to sell it. But those 4 things were really the core of a lot of master data work too. And I watched these businesses who are my clients really get excited about this stuff. And if you're selling and marketing something, you want client excitement. You want to kind of bottle that and share it with the rest of the marketplace. And we built this network. We built this huge client following. And, you know, to your question around how did I, you know, light the fire, that was it for me. It was like I never looked back. And anytime I did something that wasn't in this kind of foundational data, I had a miserable time. I tried a bunch of other things in my career and I didn't like them as much. I always came back to data. So working at all these companies, I always had some form of go-to-market, sales, marketing strategy role. When I left the last one, which is done in Bradstreet, and got sick of working at large companies. I don't mind talking to large companies, but I got sick of working in them. I wondered if the stuff I had and the way I spoke about it had any relevance. And so that was kind of big, kind of pivot point in my journey was, did I have a point of view about data management? Was data management even important, first of all, at that point? This is like 3 or 4 years ago. Sitting around hearing about the IoT, hearing all this stuff about data science. You know, I had to dig and go, okay, is this being overshadowed? Does anybody really even care? And I began to see, no matter what new technological data-oriented thing was coming out, if it didn't have good data, then it didn't matter. You know, I'll stop avoiding it now. I'm avoiding just saying, you know, garbage in, garbage out, but it isn't all, you know, that's kind of the original nugget for all this kind of conversation. But you've got to expand that story a little bit more. And so that gave me the kind of courage to realize, all right, the way I talk, the thing I see, which is the importance of foundational data and data management at the enterprise level, is relevant to everything any of these companies did in technology. So, you know, armed with that, it was like, all right, how do I now broadcast this out in a way that I can get the widest possible audience and the most acceptance and kind of a following and that sort of thing. So, you know, for me, it was, you know, that's kind of the through line. I know I wandered around a little bit in that story, but it's, you know, Saturday, so we can chat a little bit longer. And that's really how it all sort of happened. And now I'm having a ball. I'm having the most fun I've ever had. All I'm doing is talking about how people talk about data. I work with, I've got a couple of continuity clients, which was my objective. Can I work with 2 or 3 brands to help amplify their message, to create content for them? Can I do my own stuff that people will follow? I do events, I do blogs. You know, I wrote the book, which was, you know, an important thing in my career to sort of get that down. That was my COVID project last summer, was to put this book together, which is, you know, my story. I go through that Nielsen story and a few other things that kind of were watershed moments in my career, and then try and help people apply those to their own business when they're talking about data. But I found this little niche. I guess the final sort of step was all this talk about data storytelling. right? Which is like the hottest non-technical thing going on in the data space. And I started digging into data storytelling, and I realized it was exclusively about business intelligence. It was exclusively about analytics. And I said to myself too, it was like, typical. Everybody's always talking about the analytics side, the business intelligence side, the meaning side. They're not talking about the relatively boring back office, internal, clerical stuff called data management. So the niche I carved out for myself and tried to establish was, okay, data storytelling, you need two kinds. You need one kind for analytics. That's the popular one. There's 30 books out there on data storytelling for analytics. That's telling stories with data. But you also need to tell a story about the data for data management. So decided to just tell the world, look, there's two kinds of data storytelling, one for analytics and one for data management. You don't have to do Sophie's choice here. Every company needs both. And so now there's 30 books about one and there's one book about the other. And that is where I kind of, define my little niche there.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you. And do you think that now you can communicate? I mean, are you there, or do you think we are there with this other side, so the data management side? Is
No.
it much easier for you to communicate about it?
Well,
it's much easier to the perception side, for example.
I think it's I can communicate it fluently all the time, but part of, a piece that I forgot to mention too is part of my inspiration was this dealing with these data management folks who were senior data leaders who understood the how. I talked about how I don't do the how, but they get it done. And seeing their consistent frustration, concern, in some cases, just incredible, at times anger, that their organization didn't know what they were talking about. And that they were spending all this money on, buying Salesforce, or when I started, SAP, and putting in these big implementations and turning them on and they didn't work. It's because the data sucked, right? You buy new software, you don't buy new data. You don't get new data for new software. And just, their consistent frustration about why aren't we in the room? Why don't people listen to us? They're always, we bought a brand new CRM system and now they're throwing it to us going, oh, it doesn't work, fix the data. And they didn't budget for it early enough. And they think it's an afterthought. So I was trying to give them a voice. Help give them a voice. And through my career, I was often called upon by the folks I was dealing with at organizations to kind of help them explain it to their business leaders. Because that was my, little talent there. We all have a position to play. That was mine. I think I play it really well, but I stick to my position. So especially at Dun & Bradstreet, they would bring me in on these kind of command performance presentations where, okay, we're the data management group, the data governance team is bringing their own sales and marketing team in, and they want to explain to them the value of what they are bringing to those other departments. And I'd be part of that agenda because I can get people whipped up. You've seen the cartoons and stories and puppets and all the rest of it, whatever other tactics I had, and just make it engaging and make it exciting and somehow make it somewhat entertaining, but also have a point. And my point always in everything I do is, determine the truth. Determine the truth first. But we're getting there. I think data, what I smile at, like I saw somebody interviewed, I think it was on George's show a few weeks ago, or somebody, one of my buddies, we're all, the folks we hang with, Tom and I all have, shows and podcasts and all the rest of it. And somebody was remarking, this data science person, again, all respect to you in the craft there, but he was saying, I'm really noticing that data governance is really coming on the scene now. People are realizing it's, we also need data governance. Like it's a brand new idea. It's just something that he, as a data scientist, they didn't know or understand or realize that this other discipline is actually a lot older. It's like data management came before business intelligence. You had to count stuff before you figured out what it meant. It didn't, was there first. It just didn't present itself well. It's like having, your teenager come to you and go, wow, I just discovered this great new group. Have you ever heard of the Beatles? It's like, yeah, okay. Beethoven? It's like, all right, these things have been around for a long time. So I kind of smile whenever I hear some of these kind of the other side of the business remark about things that have been around forever, or like they're brand new.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure there's times when we are also the same. Oh, to our kids, did you hear of this? Yeah, Dad, that was already out 3 months ago or something. So just like, okay, I need to catch up with you guys.
Right.
So I've got a couple of questions in the chat. Then we'll go to Tom and then Guy afterwards. So we've got one question from Kishan. Do you think cloud data is going to be the future?
What's cloud data? I know what cloud is. You mean putting data in the cloud?
In the cloud, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
fine. Yeah. I mean, it already is the present, right?
Yeah.
But cloud's just a place. So again, at the risk of oversimplifying it, I just see cloud as a place to put stuff. So, and the problem is, it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't solve the data management problem, the data governance problem, the data stewardship problem. It solves the problem of, okay, getting access. But I usually compare, putting all your data in the cloud to taking all your stuff out of your basement and your attic and your closets and putting in a third-party storage bin for U-Haul. Yeah, it's all in one place. Yes, it's more accessible. But if all you did was throw all that garbage in there, you now have just one bigger pile of garbage instead of 3 small piles of garbage. So it still has to be structured. It still has to be maintained. It still has to be mastered in the way it needs to be. Master data, reference data, metadata, whatever those foundational pieces you put in there. But clouds obviously, gives people all that access. So it is the future, it seems to be. But that's as deep as I'll go.
Still needs to be managed.
Yeah, it still needs to be managed, and then you hear all this space. Okay, there's cloud, there's on-premise, there's hybrid, there's this. It's like, all right already,
Awesome. I don't know if Kim, you want to ask the question yourself, or if you prefer that I read it out.
You can read it.
Okay, so the question is, in the discussions with companies that you advise, what do you see the greatest challenges that businesses are facing? Data science, governance, or determining what to analyze, data literacy, or other concerns that you see? What are the biggest challenges that you see?
I still think the biggest challenge is explaining it. Is aligning it to explaining what you're trying to do and consistently aligning it to the business. There's 3 things a business wants to do. And again, I make these big declarative statements on purpose. There's only 3 things. They want to grow, they want to improve, and they want to protect their relationships. And so you want to grow, you want to increase sales, you want to improve operational efficiency, you want to protect, you want to mitigate risk, just 3 examples. But finding ways that data can do all those things. Data can do all those things at scale. Master data can actually do all 3 of those things at once. Sometimes with the same record, we'll do all 3 of those things. But those are the challenges I see across every enterprise. How do we grow? How do we improve? And how do we protect? Beneath that, what are the tactics? Do you use data science? Do you need more data literacy? What about business literacy? There's that too. Do all of you understand your business as well as you can? When my children went into business, I told them, it's impossible for you to know too much about the business that you're working in. Impossible. And the more you know about it, the more valuable you're going to be. And, there's a thought for all of you to take away. Learn your business. Learn your business as if you don't know it at all. Learn your business without entering the data conversation yet. If you're a public company, read your annual report. If you're a public company or a startup or so, look at your Investor Day presentation. Listen to your leaders talk to other people about the business. Use the words they use to then explain the value of what you're doing. You'll immediately shortcut them to understanding. So anytime I go see a CEO, I'm looking for quotes. I'm looking for what they say. I'm looking for how they position the business so I can go in and say, in your annual report, you said the vision of the company is to be the premier partner of choice for all your relationships. The data you have about your relationships doesn't support that idea. Let me show you why. But if you do agree with that, which is, you're going to get automatic agreement. Do you agree with what you said? Yes, of course I agree with what I said, because I said it. Then you can very quickly show how data can help that. I mean, one of my favorite meetings was I saw the president of Coca-Cola, all right? The president of Coca-Cola. I'm sitting there and we had a Nielsen day and there were 5 businesses came in and we all had like 7-10 minutes to present. And I started with some declarative statements and they were about customer relationships. They were about market penetration. I forget the other one. And it took some guts to do that, but I stood up and I said, all right, so here are 3 things I think are important. And then the next slide was a picture of the president of Coca-Cola because I said, I know you already agree with these because you said them. Now he's sitting there with the VP of marketing with all these other folks. There's kind of like this pause in the room. I'm in. Then I go into the data we have is going to directly enable these 3 things. And I don't know if I'm proud to say or not, but none of my other brothers and sisters at Nielsen got a quicker callback than our brand did on that data day because we just hit, we used their words, we used their thinking, we showed what we can do, and that's the same thing. I was an outside supplier, but all of you are providing value to your organization, and hopefully get that time where you're up in front of senior leadership. Use what they talk about to show why what you're doing is important, and use, and that they need the data to back up those ideas.
The goal comes down again, speaking the same language.
Yeah. Was I still answering the cloud storage question on that? I forgot where I was.
No, that was the other. All right, that's all good. So,
challenge, yeah.
No worries. So, Tom. Drinking is interrupted.
Very good. No, it's great.
There he is.
So Scott, I wanted to tell you how much you've rubbed off on Geith and I. We're writing a book with Pact, and as we came up with a title that was with Pact that was very fortuitous. I can't reveal the title yet, but trust me, it's very fortuitous. And Scott, what we're seeing is, okay, you've heard this a lot. 80% of our machine learning pipeline work is preparation of the data for modeling. But and Greg and I give a talk on this together. Hey, that 80% is 80% of the value of what you should be communicating back to the organization. In other words, we're finding that to be better data scientists, we have to be better data storytellers. There's so much good storytelling. We have to translate it from data science to normal thinking, but there's so much rich information other than just the prediction of the models, such that it's even more valuable than the predictions of the models. So I thought you would enjoy hearing that we're really seeing this.
That's good. I mean, the way to change people's minds is to tell a story. It's, we talk about it in data, whether it's analytics, whether it's data management, whether it's anything. That's what people respond to. That's how you emotionally connect with folks. That's how you convince people of things. That's what you're trying to do. Certainly if you're in sales and marketing, whatever, you're trying to convince people the benefits of what you have to offer, and it's not always apparent. So here's our beautiful model. I don't even know what you're talking about, right? What does it do? Why are you here? What are you got to bring people in. And so sometimes we think, and this is in any kind of situation, we're the experts or we've got this experience and we expect the person we're talking to be at the same level of experience. I'm not even talking about expertise, to have experienced the same thing we did. So now let's, bring it from, this this point further. When in fact, they're way over here. They haven't even started yet. You got to study Shakespeare, okay? Really easy. Every single Shakespeare play follows the same structure, and the first act is exposition. And watch a movie. They don't get right into the plot. Here are the characters. They establish the characters. They establish the scene. They talk about, you get a sense for who these people are, what the challenge is, where they're going. It's kind of classic storytelling. And same thing in business, regardless. Same thing in business.
In my attempts to emulate you and be as pithy as you, I will put it this way. The story of what we found important in creating the model ends up becoming more powerful than the predictions from the model.
Interesting. That's cool. That's cool. I want to go back to your 80% thing. That's something that just kind of kills me too. That 80% of data science time is munging and wrangling. Which one's munging, by the way? Is it versus wrangling? Do you do more munging first, or do you wrangling first?
So a lot of the munging and wrangling is important to get to a lot of other percentage that we've got to do. For example, we have to reduce the number of features in our model to the best set. Then we have to engineer new features. But a lot of times data scientists don't take the time to go communicate that back, which would reduce a lot of the burden on post-explainable AI, wrapping these elaborate schemes to explain elaborate, complicated models. Well, no, if you explain what features you reduce to, which ones are most important and why, which ones were engineered, that's actionable data before you get to predictions or more accurate predictions.
A feature is an attribute, right? A data attribute?
Yeah.
Right. You all know that.
A feature in the way, it's actually an input to a model. I don't know why we call them features.
Yeah, I don't know why you call them features either. We're not going to change that terminology, but here's a tip. If you're going to go talk to a business person about features, they're thinking about things that something does. All right? So it's that word is a, believe it or not, I think a very technical word in the analytics space and data science space, right? It doesn't have the same connotations outside of your world. So those kind of terms, I mean, that confused me for a while. It was like, what are you talking about? When sales, you talk about marketing, you talk about features and benefits. We're not talking about that. Those words aren't the same. They don't mean the same thing when you're doing data science. But just picking on that word there for a moment, it's a distracting word for some business folks.
Absolutely. We're finding, hey, if you're going to go give a talk, don't talk to data scientists, talk to non-data scientists. And then that way, using terms that anyone can understand. So I totally agree with you there.
My favorite one is SQL, okay, right? NoSQL, what does no stand for? In NoSQL? Anybody?
Exactly.
Not only.
Not only.
It means yes SQL. So no means yes. Literally, that's my logic. No means yes. You think anybody in the business side understands that? It's like NoSQL. No, we want NoSQL. I thought we liked SQL. No, I want MySQL. There's another great one. I just discovered this. What does MySQL stand for? What does the my mean? Doesn't mean it's yours. Anybody know?
I like it to have it mine. So no issues. Whatever it was is the meaning.
MySQL is the name, is the daughter of the guy who came up with that kind of SQL. Okay, his daughter's name was My. If you want to know why people don't understand what you're talking about.
By the way, my is not May. If it's May, it's Arabic name. So
it's May SQL.
Maybe.
That's how you pronounce it. M-Y?
I will make it for my daughter.
Oh, okay. All right. So I got Emma SQL. But I'm just, picking on these ridiculous examples. Just know that. I mean, just know that it's already confusing. It's already difficult to understand, and yet, and some of these things, and again, NoSQL is like, I look at that as symbolically as kind of the nugget of the bigger problem we've got in the space. Is this inability to communicate in a clear, concise way. And I don't know another department. I mean, a lot of departments that, companies have buzzwords, but I don't know another one that's got more than the, technology data analytics department, right? And that counterpoint that with the absolute, vital operational needs that department fills. But I think one of the biggest problems in the data and analytics space is how we talk about it. It's keeping us from getting to where we need to go. We have all these existential musings in LinkedIn and elsewhere about, the value of data. We've got to go back and explain it. We've got to, this. I would go over and over and over again to these clients who are like, our leadership doesn't understand why we need to fund this again. Organizations don't decide once a year at budget time whether they're going to fund a marketing department or a sales department or even an IT department or a finance department. Nobody's asking like, why do we have finance? But people are still asking, why do we have data? Why do we have analytics? Why do we have data science? It's not all it's not all on our laps to try and fix, but a lot of it is fixable by us. I hope there's a day not too long from now where we're not having that kind of conversation, where we're not having to constantly sell the value of our craft, of what we bring to an organization. You always got to sell a project. You always got to sell, this individual ad hoc initiative. But like I said, you can have bad marketing, but nobody's going to say, all right, we tried marketing. We had some marketing scientists come in. They grabbed all our marketing. They tried to make it work. It didn't work. We're going back to the old ways where we didn't have marketing. That's a conversation that never happens. But it does happen in the data space. I think it's crazy.
Okay.
I'm trying to do my part now.
So we can take Guy's question.
Yes. Okay. I have Jonathan. Thank you, Scott. It was really interesting. The whole session until now. First, I want to defend our feature terming because I'm not English speaker originally. I'm from the Arab world, so I'm new to English. So for me, if you use any other terminology but features, for example, I will be lost. Now, I think it's named feature because it's a kind of, yes, attribute maybe. It's also acceptable because it's featuring the solution that we have. So it's playing its own role to find the target. So just like the features or the cast in any movie, that at the end they are part of this movie, maybe. So this is how I find it. But honestly, I have one understanding here, or I have a question that maybe it's helpful to think about the future. If we are talking about data management or data governance as a formula, then kind of formula, and formula that, let's say, protect, enable, help all of the users, beside also the data scientists, to get the benefit of the data, let's name it. And then we have the data itself, which is, okay, something helping us to understand that formula and other things that we need to work on. Now, why I came to this, let's say, this example to tell, is the formula itself, it's kind of data at the end. So is there any way to use the data science techniques to improve the data management policies, governance, all of this?
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah, people talk a lot about using ML for stewardship and getting some sort of more systematic and repeatable understanding of, how to steward the data, how to structure the data. There's definitely some back and forth that can go there. But this 80% munging thing.
Okay.
Why aren't all the data scientists just screaming about that? Why is that a good thing? Why are you almost not
Because we
proud,
are not God. Okay. At the end, we are dealing with limited resources and with limited understanding about our problems. God only can make a formula and build the world according to that formula. We are looking for that formula still. That's why we need this munging and wrangling.
but it seems that but it feels like people just sort of like say that, like, oh yeah, I do 80% of my time munging and wrangling. I mean, this is not a new stat. And I forget who it was, Kurt Bourne or somebody, I forget, I saw him, and he said, okay, 80% time is munging and wrangling, and 20% of the time is spent complaining about munging and wrangling.
Exactly.
But if you're a data scientist and you're spending 20% of your time, if you're spending 80% of your time doing something that theoretically isn't really what you should be doing, then what is your job? Then what are
Scott,
you?
this is
Am I
another
getting
thing.
it wrong here? But
No. With thanks to people like you and George and David Marco, we are actually trying to encourage other data scientists now. Hey, you found some dirty data. I bet you have a data management system that causes that data to be entered a certain way. Why are there null values in that field? Go ask the programmer of that DMS system to fix it. Why is that number being typed wrong? Go ask them to fix that. When you find a source of data dirt, go make sure it gets fixed at the source. But we're just now starting to preach this.
Tom, I want to add one thing here. Sorry, Scott. I think it's the same. Your question for me, I will use your way in storytelling. It's just like telling the doctor what's your job if the patient will die at the end. It's the same. Yes, because we have to do that. Trying to help to save whatever we are able to save. Okay. Now, complaining, I try to keep it internal complaining. I complain for data scientists only. I not complain for my CEO.
I just think there's an opportunity there. Wherever there's 80% of time spent on something that isn't really, I just feel like there's an opportunity. And it's both sides. I'm not blaming any. I just feel like the whole market, the whole community, is there a way to? I say this to data management folks too. I say it at the MDM conference. It's like if you've got a bunch of data scientists, so you've got a data science team, and they're complaining about 80% of their time spent, or 50, or 30, whatever it is. Work with that group. Find out what they're doing. Don't let them start. If they're starting in a skunk works and they're coming up with their own product hierarchy on their own, make sure they understand you've already got that established. If any of that munging and wrangling includes unduplicating entities, fixing hierarchies, standardizing taxonomies, or determining geographies. Again, I very quickly backed into my 4 C's again: code, company, category, country. Those are the responsibility of and the scope of the data management, data governance team. And there's, you should be able to go and get that stuff.
Now this is, Scott, I totally agree with that, because this was the trigger for my question: is data science techniques can be used to enhance the data management and data governance. This is the trigger for this question. And I think right now, maybe I get it in a better way. Thank you.
And, it's not all going to go away. There's lots of other stuff you have to do. And I'm not saying you're not going to spend time conditioning data, making sure it's right, and fixing, there's some things that are well outside of the data management world in terms of which features they are dealing with. But I just, 5 years ago, I started hearing about 80%, and that number hasn't gone down, right? It just seems to be so accepted. I hate to see us all get complacent about that.
Yeah.
So
definitely some improvements along the way. Definitely need some good two-way communications between the different fields to help make lives more comfortable for each other.
And we tend to get, go off on another rant, we tend to get adversarial too. So I don't know if I poked at somebody on LinkedIn. Every time I see a post about, what was it yesterday? Somebody wrote, well, data without analytics is just noise. I was like, why you guys say that? Why? I said, all right, analytics without good data is just babble. See, how's that feel? I've had people say, data without business intelligence is just a cost center. All right, so your BI without good data is just overhead. I'm trying to poke back. Why does it have to be zero sum? Why does it have to be our business intelligence is better? The work you do in data management has no value until we put our work on it. Who talks that way? And the business doesn't know the difference. They're not looking at these fine, lines in between groups. They're just hearing the data analytics folks are complaining again about who's, whatever.
Yeah, you just brought a thought back onto me. Is one of your quotes, the good decisions based on bad data is bad decisions you don't know about yet. So.
Exactly, my most quoted quote.
Yeah.
I'm Phileas, have you ever heard a baker stand up and say, most of us don't hear bakers stand up and say, but just hypothetically, a baker go, this flour is worthless until I turn it into bread. No, because they respect the ingredients. So understanding that we both have parts to play and both of them are connected in a way that will help the organization. But there's a competitiveness that's unnecessary. There's an edge being brought by some of these analytics leaders, and I try and find them, and I try and convince them, or at least I'm going to speak up about it and go, I'm not saying data is better than analytics. I'm saying they're both important. I'm not saying data management is more important than business intelligence. I'm saying there's two things, and you need them both.
Certainly. We've just gone 10 past. Are you still good for a few more questions?
Sure. I'm having fun here.
You're having fun. Okay. Let's see. We had two in the chat. I'm not sure if is it Zena? I'm not sure if you want to ask your question yourself, or I can read it out from the chat.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me?
Hi there.
Sorry, I cannot speak because I'm driving actually, and I wouldn't like to miss your talk. But if I can just say briefly, I'm PhD student currently in my last year. I am Moroccan, but doing the PhD in France, and actually I see a huge opportunity here in France regarding data scientists and data analysis, and my research team and everyone have been always encouraging me to start and launch my startup. And I'm just thinking, for instance, based on your experience, Tyler, is it the right decision? I mean, can I just go on and jump in and be naive and see what it will give, or should I wait and go for companies and build an experience, and then after, I don't know, 10 years of experience, say, okay, I can now start my company? Thank you.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, is it?
I don't know. It sounds like you want. I mean, let me put it this way: if you wait 10 years, you may not have the shot you have today. If you wait 10 years, you may not feel the way you do right now. So, taking risks earlier tends to be better than, or people tend to try and take those risks earlier in their career than they do later in their career, certainly, middle of their career. But, it depends on the business opportunity and all the rest of it. But if you have a great idea, the world's looking for great ideas. So,
okay, great. Thank you a lot.
If that helps. I don't know. It's kind of like a soft answer, but.
But thank you. Actually, I was really looking for your answer, and I would just add a last small question. I need to go, but just do you think that interpreting data is now more important than analyzing it? Explaining data and incorporating those new tools of what we call explainable artificial intelligence, which is, I think, an emerging field now that started like 2019 or something like this. Do you think that it is important to focus on this field?
Yeah, I mean, that's a form of data literacy, right? It's a form of understanding how to put data into a business approach. So anything that's going to help an organization leverage the data work that's going on. And so I'll just put everything you folks do and the folks I deal with do as, just call it data work for now, is
Okay,
valuable, right? So,
Thank you.
people are like, okay, well, we have this great data, but we didn't use it. I made this great meal and nobody ate it. It's just, it's another thing. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an important addition to this, set of tactics we have in the data space. And it's something that, it's part of why data storytelling, whether it's for business intelligence or for data management, why data literacy, why these things are so hot right now. Because it's the way to get the value out of the data. I mean, nobody's saying, again, and if you don't do that, then you get into those ridiculous conversations I was talking about before. Like, why do we even need data? It never works. So it's not going to help us. There's not a business out there that's not going to get helped by data. There's not an enterprise out there that doesn't need, data science, data management, business intelligence to get where it needs to go. Every company, if you sum up the reason for every business, the purpose for every enterprise is to deliver value to their relationships through their brands at scale. The at scale part, that's where all of you come in. At scale means you need technology. Technology, very simply, hardware, software, data. In data, you need to determine the truth and derive meaning. That's where we all come in. But nobody's doing anything at scale unless they've got the right data and analytics to do it. And that's where many of our opportunities are. Finding that notion, hooking yourself up to the right people in your organization that are trying to do something, they figured out how to do it in a petri dish, and instead of doing it a dozen times, they want to do it 1,000,000 times. That ain't happening without data and analytics and data science and all that other stuff. So, the value that all of us can bring to a company, the potential value, I believe, has never been greater. Magdi was talking about, when I started, data was like this hidden secret. It was still around. There were just not that many people talking about it. But the reason it went from that to now is because of the kinds of things it can do when it's done right, when it's leveraged well, when it is put into play, when it is accepted by the organization. So, I wouldn't, and I believe what we do can change a company more than any other department. So, marketing had its day, sales had its day, finance, that, you got to have it. But none of those departments, all respect, are going to can change the nature of a business. That, for me, that's where the exciting stuff happens. How do you change the nature of your business in the way it delivers value to your relationships through your brands at scale?
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Greg, I don't know if you want to ask your question yourself or read it from the chat.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay.
Hey, Greg, how are you?
Hey, good, you?
What are you hiding behind there for? Okay.
So, Greg's asking, what are the tools needed for great data management, or what does the architecture look like, and what are the roles needed to have great data management?
Those are three fabulous how questions. I'm going to punt on all of them. The tools, they've got MDM. You got to have MDM platforms out there. The roles are, I'm not an organizational expert. I really don't have, any answers I have for this question, Greg, I've learned from somebody else. So it's not really my particular expertise when we get kind of into the execution, the organizational part. I'm the guy who's going to try to explain, put the story together around why. But, fundamentally, I think if the organization has organized itself properly around data and analytics, then they've got a CDO, they've got a chief data officer that doesn't report, to the VP of IT who reports to the CIO who reports to the CIO. They're true chief level, board level person, just like the CMO, just like the CFO. Those organizations, there's plenty of data out there that proves those organizations do better than organizations that don't have that kind of organizational structure. So having for lack of a better term, a data department that, God forbid, isn't part of IT, helps helps organizations accelerate that value.
Okay.
Totally makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, and then I think Magdi had another question.
Yes, I would like to circle back to the wrangling topic.
Okay.
As you said that, yeah, the 80%.
Munging first.
Yeah,
or wrangling?
munging and wrangling.
Okay, so it's combined
Well,
munging and wrangling.
So the 80%.
You do 40% munging,
The
40% wrangling. I know. I'm not going to let you ask.
I wouldn't go into the details.
Okay.
Go into details. But in general, because you said the 80%, everybody's talking about it since for 5 years, nothing is changing. And I was just thinking that, don't you think that proper data management is to a certain extent in a utopia because of the human factor? And what I mean under that you can have the willingness to have data management. You can reach the level of data literacy within a company, but you have the humans. So you have the individualism. This is what I'm thinking of, that you cannot avoid human mistakes. So the manual typing mistakes, for example, you can reduce maybe, but you cannot avoid. And secondly, because we all want to be individuals in a way. And you can look at it not only on an individual, so a personalized level, but you can look at it that, yeah, there is marketing department, there is the sales department, there is the finance department. And maybe we have a great schema how to manage the data, but we have also a departmental purpose or a departmental style to handle data. That is what I mean under individualism, that it will always come in, and there will be always someone or a department who want to do it a little bit different by their way, for example. And that's why I'm asking that at the end, for me, somehow the 100% data management will never exist, which means that this wrangling and munging will be always there, because there will be always a department or a person who will do it differently in an individual way. Maybe I'm too philosophical or theoretical in that, but I think in practice this is how it will work, because we are human. So we want to bring our humanity in this whole process, and not like robots doing things. What do you think about that?
I think you're right. If you got rid of people, then dealing with data would be a whole lot easier. Next question. No, it's yeah. So I think some of the things you mentioned are absolutely valid. I'm just teasing you a little bit there.
We have to go to AI, right?
Yeah. So there's a long way from 100% data management taking over, versus 80% munging and wrangling as that number. Can we get down to 40? Can we get it down to 10? But part of what data governance does, and part of the reason data governance and data management needs a better story at an organization, is successful data management departments help establish a standard for their organization. That's why I counsel people. I talked about vocabulary. I hate words like cleansing, hygiene. Want to scare a bunch of business people, tell them they're going to be part of a data hygiene project. They'll go running for the door. Even data quality. I pick on the word data quality, emotional, subjective. But if you come out and say, we need to set a standard for the organization. Standards work. Standards enable scale. Standards every vertical has a standard. Operational standards and the integrity of those standards is critical to the success of an enterprise and every kind of marketplace. And so while there's room for creativity, and I think that's what you're talking about there in terms of individuality, there isn't room for creativity on changing a product hierarchy that is in every report that everybody has. Because if you change the product hierarchy, your results come out a little bit better for for your little ad hoc project. So there's a balance, but standards are critical. And organizations, when they set a standard, they're able to do a lot more. You know, you have these restrictions. They might, you know, some people might call it that. But the reason we have a common structure and identification code and taxonomy for the things we deal with for our brands and relationships is because we have to understand them all the same way. We have to integrate across different, you know, silos and inputs and features, I guess. And so it's really about that balance. But if everybody just goes off and does their own thing, you're going to have chaos. You know, organizations have standards around, think about brands, if you just sort of think about this idea. So I've thought a lot about how a CDO probably should own data at an organization like a CMO, a chief marketing officer, owns the brand. So I don't know what kinds of companies you all folks work at, but if you're working for any kind of global company or an enterprise or a product company or, you know, any kind of enterprise, you have brands. Those brands, you know, if you work at Coca-Cola, the CMO at Coca-Cola owns the Coca-Cola brand. Everybody benefits from it, but they own it, which means they govern it. They steward it. They work on the equity. They understand it as an asset. I'm using terminology on purpose that sounds a whole lot like how people talk about data. Because at that theoretical level, I don't mind you getting philosophical and theoretical. I live at, like, you know, the symbolic level almost. That approach is important. That governance is critical for a company to be successful. So some of it, and again, if the data managers, I'm not, you know, defending everything my part of the world does, because they don't explain that very well. They're going to say, we need higher data quality. And they sound like they're whining. It's like, you know, we need better data quality because, you know, it's all dirty and corrupt and messy and hygiene. And it's like, what does that have to do with anything? Who cares? You got to be able to explain it the right way. So standards are a really good way, I think, to explain it to the higher level folks who then need to support that kind of initiative. But, you know, creativity is obviously core. I'm a very creative guy. I think that's my top attribute as far as I'm concerned. If somebody asked me, you know, in an interview, that's what I would say. But I still stick to, like, you know, there's still certain ways that things need to happen. Not because, you know, somebody said so, but because they work that way. That's what makes them work.
Awesome. So, yeah, we got a little bit quieter in the chat. I don't think there's any more questions coming through. But I would like to ask one last one from, and when I listening at the MDM 2.0. I remember the data ninja when he was going through his slide deck and everything, and something that I remember that still rings a little bit in the head is that we've got all this. Everyone's thinking, okay, let's jump into the world of data science, data analytics, and he mentioned that he reckons the next explosive job in the next few years is going to be on the MDM, the data stewards. What's your thoughts on that? That is the next industry to start increasing or start to pick up in the data scene.
I mean, data stewards have been around. So I remember when he was talking about that. It's like, that's not a new thing, right? And data stewards tend to be really sometimes really in the weeds of kind of reconciling, matching, and looking at entities and cleaning stuff up. So maybe he was talking about elevating that position. But anybody who's going to help, you know, make better data for an organization, I guess that's kind of what he's talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else for a question for our friend Scott?
If I can take a dad moment, everyone. Scott, you remember that empathy? I don't know, it's pretty epic. You guys remember when I did the homage post and the fan post? So there's very few living people I did a homage post to. But Scott's messages, in my opinion, are so important what the work that all data specialists do, that I think he's going to be considered one of the greats of this, the early days of the data age. And I'm serious.
Yes.
Now he's laughing because he thinks
I'm laughing
but-
because you just embarrassed me.
Oh,
Thank you,
but-
thank you, Tom.
No, seriously, guys, let's really rally around this in every aspect of what we do. It really comes down to being good storytellers, even when we're on the road to machine learning pipeline development, even when we do the predictive models. Don't just leave it as a prediction, leave it as a story too.
And one tip about telling a story to business people: it's a story about that specific topic and how it's going to drive the business. It's not your life story. It's a big difference. First we tried this and then that didn't work, so we figured out this and then that worked, but then we added this, and all these. It's like, get to it. How you got to where you are to the point to tell the story. Wonderful, fascinating, trial and error. Some of your peers will learn from that, but that's not what the business folks need to hear right away. Your first 5 minutes, most important part of the meeting. Capture their attention, get their interest, build their desire, drive them to some form of action. I didn't just make those words up. Attention, interest, desire, and action. It's like a classic sales process. So just, learn that. Practice the soft skills. Say it in the mirror. Tell your partner who doesn't understand what you're talking about. Say, does this make sense? Do it in a video. Listen to yourself. You don't have to post it all. I know it's awkward. I know people are like, well, I do it. That's all I do. So it's not fair to compare what I do, the way I do it, to what you're doing every day, because you have actual, techniques and skills that make data work. I just talk about talking about it. But to share with you some of the techniques that I work on and hone to be able to to put a compelling message together, you got to practice. You got to do it. And, sometimes you think, well, I'll just do it when I get there. If you're going to shout with your CEO, you better know what you're going to say. That's not the first time to talk about it. Say it aloud. You might sound, might feel like you're kooky, but it's uncomfortable to even think about it. But it's going to be worse if you blow that meeting, if you blow that opportunity, because you didn't try it once before. So everybody, every professional athlete, every actor, everybody you see on TV, all these people practice, they train, they rehearse, they got it down, and then they make it appear like they were doing it for the first time. That's, part of the technique. But it's rare that they're just going to singers don't just get on stage for the first time and go, oh, let me try this tune. That's rare.
Oh, just to let y'all know, when I started getting a ton of speaking requests, guess who I talked to first to be my ongoing mentor? That's why I call Scott Big Brother.
Yes, happy to help whenever on that kind of stuff. It's what I do. It's all I do at this point. And it was my favorite part of what I did in my whole career. So, I run to speaking opportunities. I look for this kind of stuff. I'm delighted that you brought me on today, and appreciate everybody's time on a Saturday here talking about this. But I do podcasts, I do these events, I do all this. I love all that stuff. And it helps me practice. It helps me kind of figure this stuff out, talk it out. It sounds good in your head, but until you say it and somebody reacts to it, you don't know if it's working yet.
Yeah. Understood. Well, guys, I think it's a good... Oh, Jonathan, forgive me. You're in charge. And yes, Maggie.
I will take it. I will take it over from Jonathan now and wrap this up. Scott, I always love to hear you and listen to all your podcasts and talks. And thank you very much for accepting our invitation. It was really insightful and very authentical. So this is what I also have to add. So that is not only the knowledge you deliver, but the way how you deliver it is just fantastic. So the message gets there where it should be. So thank you again also for the audience for joining us today. And
Thank you, Uncle Scott.
See each other next
Hey, everybody.
It was our pleasure having you here today.
Amazing.
Yeah, there we go.
Amazing.
Okay.
Absolutely amazing.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so